Michael sat alone in the dimly lit living room, the soft hum of the ceiling fan doing little to drown out the heavy silence. The house felt colder than usual, not because of the temperature, but because of the growing distance between him and Lisa. For weeks, he had noticed the changes, her sudden late nights, the unexplained phone calls she dismissed as work-related, and the way she had started guarding her phone like it held state secrets. Tonight, however, was different. Lisa had texted him earlier claiming she'd be home late due to a team meeting that ran over. But Michael wasn't a fool. He had learned to recognize the lies tucked neatly between her words. As he sat on the couch staring at the faint glow of his phone, he scrolled through the tracking app he had secretly installed on her device weeks ago. The blinking dot on the map showed her car parked at a hotel across town, a far cry from the office she claimed to be at. Michael felt a knot tighten in his stomach, anger boiling beneath the surface, but he didn't let it consume him. Instead, he inhaled deeply, his jaw tightening as his mind began racing. Confronting her tonight would be pointless. She'd deny everything, twist the story, or cry her way out of it. He needed proof. Standing from the couch, Michael moved to his desk in the corner of the room. Inside a drawer, hidden beneath stacks of old receipts, was the device he had prepared for this very moment. A discreet voice recorder. Earlier that week, he had slipped it into Lisa's car. It was risky, but necessary. Now, as he connected the device to his laptop, his hands trembled slightly, not out of fear but out of anticipation. The playback began with static before Lisa's voice came through, clear and carefree. "I'll meet you there in 30 minutes, she said, her tone light and flirtatious. A man's voice responded, chuckling softly, "Don't keep me waiting." Michael's hand clenched into a fist as he listened to the brief exchange, his suspicions now confirmed. He paused the recording and leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't just betrayal, it was the way she carried it so easily, as if their marriage had meant nothing. But Michael wasn't going to fall apart. Lisa thought she was safe, that she could outsmart him. She had no idea what was coming. Michael's lips curved into a tight smile, one that held no humor. This wasn't going to end with a quiet argument behind closed doors. No, this would be something she'd never forget. Michael didn't sleep that night. Instead, he spent hours meticulously planning his next steps. He wasn't the kind of man to act impulsively. Lisa had underestimated him, but that was her mistake. She thought he was predictable, a man who would either look the other way or crumble under the weight of her betrayal. But Michael wasn't weak, and he wasn't about to let her walk all over him. The following morning, Lisa acted as if everything was normal. She greeted him with a quick kiss on the cheek before heading out the door. "Don't wait up tonight," she called. "Another late one at the office." Michael watched her leave, his expression blank. Inside, however, he was calm, methodical. He pulled out his phone and called the private investigator he had hired a week earlier. "She was at the hotel again last night," Michael said flatly. "I need you to follow her today. Get me everything. Photos, times, locations." "You got it," the investigator replied. Michael hung up and sat down at his desk. He opened his laptop and began organizing the evidence he already had. Recordings, screenshots of her texts, the tracker logs showing her car parked at suspicious locations. He wanted it all laid out airtight. Lisa wouldn't have a chance to deny it when the time came. That afternoon, the investigator called back. "She's at a cafe downtown with him now," he said. "I've got photos. They're holding hands. Pretty cozy." Michael closed his eyes briefly, the confirmation hitting him like a punch to the gut. But he didn't let the pain linger. Instead, he asked, "Are they leaving together?" "They are," the investigator said. "I'll follow them." By the end of the day, Michael had everything he needed. Photos of Lisa and Eric walking arm in arm, laughing, and eventually entering the same hotel room. The investigator sent him a file filled with time-stamped images, each one more damning than the last. Michael stared at the photos on his screen, his jaw tightening. The man in the pictures was younger, confident, and completely unaware of the storm about to hit. That evening, Lisa came home late, as expected. She walked into the living room, her smile easy and relaxed. "Long day," she said, tossing her bag onto the couch. "I'm exhausted." Michael looked up from his laptop, keeping his expression neutral. "Sounds like you're working hard," he said. She nodded, stretching. "Yeah, you know how it is." He studied her for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. She had no idea he knew, no idea how carefully he was setting the stage. "Get some rest," he said, his voice calm. "You deserve it." As she disappeared down the hallway, Michael returned to his laptop, a plan forming in his mind. He wasn't going to confront her tonight. No, the confrontation would come later, when she least expected it, in front of everyone she cared about. Lisa thought she was clever, thought she had everything under control. But soon Michael would turn the tables in a way she could never imagine. The days leading up to the confrontation were crucial for Michael. He spent every moment refining his plan, ensuring that nothing was left to chance. He carefully compiled all the evidence, photos, recordings, texts, and GPS logs, into a single organized folder. This wasn't just about confronting Lisa, it was about making sure she couldn't wriggle her way out of the truth. The opportunity for the confrontation came sooner than he expected. Lisa announced over breakfast one morning that she wanted to host a small dinner party for their closest friends and family. "Just something intimate," she said, her tone casual. "We've been so busy lately, it'll be nice to reconnect with everyone." Michael raised an eyebrow but didn't let his expression betray him. "That sounds great," he said. Inside, he was already calculating. A dinner party would be the perfect stage for what he had planned. Public enough to make it impactful, but intimate enough to ensure the message hit home for Lisa and Eric. In the days leading up to the party, Michael worked quietly behind the scenes. He coordinated with the private investigator to get high-quality prints of the photos and prepared a slideshow with timestamps and captions. He even drafted a short speech, not because he wanted to, but because he knew every word would cut deeper than the last. The night of the party, Lisa was in her element. She floated around the room, greeting guests with her signature charm. Michael watched her closely, noting how easily she played the role of a devoted wife. It was almost admirable, the way she managed to hide her betrayal so well. "Michael, you've outdone yourself with the setup," one of their friends said, clapping him on the back. "This is fantastic." Michael smiled politely. "It's all Lisa's idea," he replied. As dinner was served and conversations flowed, Michael remained calm, waiting for the right moment. When dessert was about to be served, he stood up and clinked his glass, silencing the room. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," he began, his voice steady. "It means a lot to Lisa and me to have all of you here." Lisa smiled, her eyes shining as she looked around the table. "But before we continue," Michael said, his tone shifting, "I have something important to share." He reached for the remote control on the table and pressed a button. The screen behind him lit up, displaying the first photo, Lisa and Eric sitting in the cafe laughing together. The room fell silent. Lisa froze, her smile vanishing as the photo lingered on the screen. "Over the past few months," Michael continued, his voice cold, "I've been dealing with something no husband should ever have to face. Betrayal, lies, deceit. And I think it's time everyone here knows the truth." He clicked to the next slide, a photo of Lisa and Eric walking arm in arm. Gasps rippled through the room. Lisa's face turned pale, her hands trembling as she tried to speak. "Michael, please," she began, but he cut her off. "Save it," he said sharply. "You've had plenty of time to explain yourself. Tonight, the only thing I want is for everyone to see you for who you really are." The final slide appeared, Lisa and Eric entering the hotel together. The evidence was undeniable. Guests exchanged shocked glances, some whispering while others stared in stunned silence. Michael turned to Lisa, his gaze icy. "You thought I didn't know. You thought you could fool me. But the truth always comes out, Lisa." The silence in the room was deafening as Lisa buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. Michael felt a weight lift off his shoulders. This was just the beginning of her reckoning. The aftermath of the dinner party was exactly as Michael had anticipated. Lisa's perfect facade had crumbled in front of their closest friends and family. Some guests left the house immediately, unable to handle the awkward tension. Others stayed behind, watching Lisa as she struggled to compose herself. her face streaked with tears. Michael remained calm, sitting at the head of the table, his expression cold and unreadable. Lisa looked at him with desperation in her eyes. "Michael, please," she whispered. "Can we talk about this in private?" Michael leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "Private? That's ironic coming from you, don't you think?" Lisa flinched, the weight of his words cutting deep. The room was silent except for the occasional murmurs of the remaining guests. Finally, Lisa stood and stumbled out of the dining room, retreating to the kitchen. Michael didn't follow her, he had no reason to. After the last guest left, Michael found Lisa sitting on the kitchen floor, her head in her hands. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said between sobs. "I don't even know why it happened." Michael crossed his arms, standing over her like a man who had already made up his mind. "Spare me the excuses, Lisa. You didn't think about me, our marriage, or our life when you made those choices. This isn't just about what you did. It's about how you lied to my face every single day." "I was lonely," Lisa said, her voice barely audible. "You were always so busy, so distant." Michael cut her off, his tone sharp. "Don't you dare try to blame this on me. I worked hard to give us the life we have. And what did you do with it? You threw it away for someone who doesn't even have the decency to show his face here tonight." Lisa's sobs grew louder, but Michael felt no sympathy. She had made her bed and now she would lie in it. Over the next few days, Lisa tried everything to repair the damage. She begged Michael for forgiveness, promising to end her affair and work on their marriage. But Michael wasn't interested. His mind was already focused on the next phase of his plan. He contacted his lawyer and initiated divorce proceedings, ensuring that all the evidence he had gathered would work in his favor. Financially, Lisa would be left with little. He had made sure of that. Emotionally, she was already shattered, her reputation ruined among their social circle. Michael also took steps to secure the house. It was his name on the deed, and he had no intention of letting Lisa stay. By the end of the week, she had packed her bags and left, moving into a small apartment across town. Her lover, Eric, had been conspicuously absent since the dinner party. Michael suspected that Eric had no intention of sticking around once the affair was exposed. Lisa was truly alone now, left to face the consequences of her actions. One evening, as Michael sat in his newly quiet home, he received a call from an old friend who had been at the party. "You know, Michael," the friend said, "what you did was brutal, but it was justified. You deserved better than what she gave you." Michael sighed, a small smile forming on his lips. "I didn't do it to be brutal," he replied. "I did it to reclaim my life." And reclaim it he had. The house was peaceful again, free from the weight of betrayal. Michael knew he had more work to do to rebuild himself, but for the first time in months he felt like he could breathe again. Lisa's life unraveled quickly after she moved out. The dinner party had been the spark that set her social world on fire. Friends who once admired her turned their backs, unwilling to associate with someone so publicly exposed. Even her family, who had always been supportive, kept their distance, ashamed of the scandal that now defined her. Her lover, Eric, was nowhere to be found. He had ghosted her immediately after the dinner party, leaving her to face the fallout alone. Desperate, Lisa tried calling him, texting him, even showing up at his workplace. But each time she was met with silence or a cold dismissal. It wasn't just her personal life that crumbled. Her professional life was affected too. Word of the scandal had spread, and whispers began circulating at her office. Her colleagues avoided her in meetings, and her boss, who once praised her work, began assigning her smaller, less important tasks. A week later, she was called into his office. "Lisa," he began, his tone measured but firm, "I think it's best for the company if we part ways. I'll ensure you get a fair severance package." Lisa left the office with a cardboard box of her belongings and tears streaming down her face. Everything she had taken for granted, her marriage, her career, her social standing, was gone. She was truly alone, and the weight of her choices bore down on her like a crushing tide. Michael, on the other hand, was thriving. The house felt brighter, calmer, without Lisa's presence. He spent his days focusing on work and rebuilding his life, throwing himself into projects he had neglected during the turmoil. His evenings were spent reconnecting with old friends, hitting the gym, and rediscovering hobbies that brought him joy. But Michael's true focus was on his children. His 2 teenage sons, Ryan and Ethan, had always been his priority, and now more than ever, he wanted to ensure they felt secure. He sat them down one evening to explain everything, showing them the evidence he had gathered. "I'm not telling you this to hurt your mom," Michael said, his voice steady. "But I want you to understand the truth. What she did was wrong, and I couldn't allow it to continue." The boys listened quietly, their expressions a mix of anger and sadness. "We'll be okay, Dad," Ryan said after a long pause. "We're on your side." Michael felt a surge of pride and relief. His relationship with his sons was stronger than ever, and together, they began to heal. One afternoon, as Michael was walking through the park, he spotted Lisa sitting on a bench. She looked disheveled, her once polished appearance now replaced by a hollow, defeated aura. She glanced up and saw him, her eyes widening with a flicker of hope. "Michael," she called, standing up and approaching him. "Please, can we talk?" Michael stopped but didn't close the distance between them. "There's nothing left to say, Lisa," he replied coldly. "I've lost everything," she said, her voice trembling. "I know I hurt you and I'll never forgive myself for it. But can't we at least try to make things right?" Michael shook his head. "You didn't just hurt me, Lisa. You destroyed the life we built together, and for what? A fling with someone who didn't even have the decency to stand by you when it all fell apart?" Tears streamed down Lisa's face as she nodded, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "You're right," she whispered. "I don't deserve forgiveness." Michael stared at her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a calm but firm voice, he said, "I hope you find a way to fix your life, Lisa, but that's not my responsibility anymore." Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked away, leaving Lisa standing alone in the park. Months passed, and Michael had rebuilt his life piece by piece. The storm that Lisa had brought into his world was a distant memory now, replaced with a sense of peace and purpose. His home, once filled with tension and deceit, was now a sanctuary of calm and happiness. His relationship with Ryan and Ethan had grown stronger, and the 3 of them often spent weekends together hiking, watching movies, or just talking late into the night. Professionally, Michael excelled. Without the weight of Lisa's betrayal dragging him down, he poured his energy into his career, earning a promotion and the respect of his colleagues. He even began mentoring younger professionals, finding fulfillment in helping others navigate challenges he once faced himself. One evening, Michael attended a charity gala hosted by his company. The room was filled with laughter and warmth, a sharp contrast to the cold, calculated event he had orchestrated months earlier to expose Lisa. This time, Michael felt completely at ease. As he mingled with guests, a woman named Sophie caught his eye. She was intelligent, kind, and refreshingly straightforward, a stark contrast to the manipulation and deceit he had endured. They spent the evening talking, and for the first time in a long while, Michael felt a spark of something new, something hopeful. It wasn't about replacing Lisa or filling a void. It was about moving forward. Meanwhile, Lisa's life continued its downward spiral. The people she had once called friends avoided her, unwilling to associate with someone so publicly disgraced. Eric, the man she had risked everything for, had completely vanished, leaving her with nothing but regret. She spent her days in a small, shabby apartment, working a low-paying job that barely covered her expenses. The glamorous life she had once flaunted was gone, replaced with a daily grind that left her exhausted and alone. Every now and then she would think about reaching out to Michael to beg for another chance. But deep down she knew it was too late. She had burned every bridge, and the man she had betrayed was no longer the man who would take her back. One afternoon, as Michael walked through the city with Sophie, they passed a familiar figure sitting outside a coffee shop. Lisa. She looked up and saw them, her eyes widening with a flicker of recognition and longing. Michael glanced at her briefly but didn't stop. He kept walking, his focus entirely on the conversation he was having with Sophie. For Lisa, that moment was the final blow. Watching Michael move on with someone else, someone who clearly brought him happiness, was a painful reminder of everything she had lost. She buried her face in her hands, overcome with regret, but no amount of tears could undo the choices she had made. For Michael, the encounter was nothing more than a passing moment. Lisa was a part of his past, a chapter he had closed long ago. His focus was on the future, and the future was bright. That evening, as Michael and Sophie shared a quiet dinner together, he reflected on how far he had come. The betrayal that had once consumed him was no longer a source of pain. It was a stepping stone that had led him to this moment. "Do you ever think about her?" Sophie asked gently. Michael shook his head. "Not really," he said, smiling. "She's where she needs to be, and so am I." The story ends not with revenge, but with redemption. Michael had taken control of his life, faced the betrayal head-on, and come out stronger. The pain Lisa caused him didn't define him. It empowered him to rebuild, to find peace, and to move forward with dignity and strength.